There we go. I bet that'll work.
I hear something.
Oh, there we go.
Woohoo!
Hi, yay!
And you can hear us too?
Yes.
Hey, all right.
How exciting.
I totally want this.
Hi.
Hi, good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too.
Wait, push the button. Push the button on the dock cam.
Seriously?
Turn it back on.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I'm seeing like looks like a tray or something.
Yeah, you are not seeing what I'm hoping for you to see. It totally was just on.
I know. I did see the whole group for a few minutes there. There we go.
All right, we're not touching anything from here on out.
Sounds like a good plan.
That's right. All right, I think we're good to go. Do you want us to introduce ourselves?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay. I'm Wendy Ramos, Director of Student Services.
Hello.
I'm Sabrina Waning, elementary resource teacher.
Great.
Kevin Marco, Brown Middle School, resource.
Nicole Monroy, Evergreen resource, middle school.
I'm Heidi. I teach life skills at the high school.
Matt Nova.
Shannon Corbo High School, Medco High School resource.
Great. Was that everybody?
Kaylee Tobias, Century High School resource.
Okay. Super. All right. So I'm Lisa Piano. Did I work with everyone last year? Is this all repeat participants?
Our middle school participants are new.
Welcome. All right, so I work for the Capital Region Education Council in Hartford, Connecticut, and we are going to be working on social emotional learning. This is not my area of expertise. However, one of my colleagues did share a presentation, and when I looked it over, one of the things that really stood out to me is a lot of what this is about is executive function skills, especially for our kids who have IEPs. And that is something that I know quite a bit about. So I'm going to be trying to make some connections to that as we talk about what social emotional learning looks like, because a lot of that is should be happening in the general education curriculum. So it's a big emphasis for Tier 1. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and share my screen with you so you can see my PowerPoint. So you guys let me know if that works.
And Lisa, can I say one thing? Because we talked about this a little bit last time we met, but not everybody was here. Is one of the things I know we talked about with this particular topic is starting to do that bridge to our gen ed teachers and to support them. So some of these, maybe there's those Tier 1 things, but in our district, they may still be in Tier 3, even though they're really Tier 1. And so helping our gen ed teachers to support them, get some ideas, get some new learning, and that they have an opportunity to present some of this information to our gen ed peers. So I just want to make sure I gave that context.
Sounds good. And I did see, I looked up on the internet for the public service announcement that came out of your district, and I thought that was really great. So I did get a chance to take a look at that as well. All right, so let's give this a shot here. Well, this might get tricky, so we might have to play around with this a little bit. So are you seeing like multiple images here?
Yep.
All right, let's try this. How about now? Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Just loading sign. Oh,
Okay.
way to go.
Okay, you got the whole PowerPoint screen?
And we sent it out to everybody so they can have it on their own screens as well.
Excellent. Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, so in our session today, what I'm hoping we'll be able to accomplish is talking about social emotional learning and how we're going to integrate that into our daily instructional practices. We're going to look at our own social emotional competencies so that we can have a greater understanding of what it is our students need to learn to do. Because one of the really important things when it comes to social emotional learning is that we need to be good role models. So in order for us to be good role models, we need to have a good awareness of our own skills. And then I wanted to add in also specifically some strategies that we can use to help kids with disabilities acquire these skills, because the majority of the curriculum that our and evidence-based were developed for kids that would be considered typical, and there was a consideration for kids that have disabilities. So that's what I'm hoping we'll accomplish today. So this is a nice little graphic to show us exactly what social emotional learning is, and it describes skills that students are going to acquire in 5 different areas. So we've got self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making. So again, if you look at this language and you have some familiarity with executive function skills, a lot of this is exactly what that is. So that ability to regulate your emotions and to control your behavior in order to achieve a goal, that's under management. And then if you look at social awareness, showing understanding and empathy for others, that's that theory of mind, that ability to take perspective. And then having an awareness of yourself, so at the top of the screen there, so you understand your own emotions, what's important to you, what you do well, what are some of the things that you struggle with, having that intuition or that self-understanding. And then responsible decision making. So being able to make good choices that allows you to meet your goals. And then forming positive relationships. So these are the 5 major areas of social and emotional learning.
Lisa, you're kind of cutting out every once in a while, like you're maybe looking down and up or something for the sound.
Okay, all right. I'll try and stay steady, and you let me know if that's continuing to happen.
All right, thank you.
So if you take a look at this slide here, and I'm also getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if that's just from my mic, but hopefully this will work itself out. If you look at this slide here, again, it's got some discrete skills that are social emotional learning. So I'll just let you take a look at that for a second.
No. Uh-oh, now I just did the wrong thing, didn't I? Except now I can't hear.
Did I lose you?
We're just trying to see if we can get the feedback down.
Yeah, does that sound a little bit better on your end?
It does. How about you guys?
That does sound better, yeah.
That does sound better?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right,
Yes.
go back.
My best photo of the night, that's right, 4:15 rocking it.
All right, how does that look? Are you seeing the slides again?
Yes.
All right, okay. So here are our, again, our skills that we want to be able to demonstrate. And then here in Connecticut, we have, we made the connections to the Common Core State Standards and social emotional learning. So even in an academic area, for example, learning vocabulary words, what's the connection to social emotional learning? And it's that self-management of being able to make a plan, carry out a plan, to be able to revise the plan. So no matter what students are working with, they still have to bring those emotional skills or those executive skills to the table in order to be able to accomplish any of these tasks. Again, here's some connections for students. And then in this slide, we've added, what do teachers need to be able to do? It's just like the students, the teachers need to have that good organization, reflection, multiple strategies to get them to a goal so that they can help students complete the tasks. Because one of the things we need to keep in mind with these competencies is that the kids that we're teaching need external support to develop these skills. They are not intrinsically ready to be able to display these skills without some support from the outside. And that from the outside is going to come from us as teachers. So, how does social emotional learning promote academics? And what are some of those skills that students need in order to accomplish instructional tasks? So what do you do if your students need social emotional learning? And this is just something I want you to just talk a little bit about before we go on. So and I know we've only seen a couple of slides, but what do you see as the connection between the social emotional learning skills and academics? And what do you see that your students need in order to be able to accomplish instructional tasks? And how do you teach that to them? So I'm going to exit out of the PowerPoint so I can see you for a minute, and I'm going to let you talk about that amongst yourselves.
Should we do trios, you guys? Does that work? Move our tables anyway. We can move our trios and quadruples. Okay. So what do we
Yeah, I think making it so concrete, though, the way she just worded it in the goals, like, oh, yeah, that just kids to future student behaviors to testing and if things are being questions is, you know, I mean, I don't have that skill as you.
No, we don't want to do it right now.
Yeah.
I know that even the teacher, so that helps the students but they don't get a very cool teacher. So this having that question is something that I think a lot of is huge. It's huge because it's regulated against the or they're not getting it the way or they're intending to the way that you can really places that are rails. You're not really there for.
Well, or the awareness of it's not going well,
Exactly.
one of those soft skills, like, I mean, right, I mean, that's, yeah.
Because you're here.
Right. You know, am I calming, am I doing
One of my students in my class was and then like stopped and said, she was someone so surgery now. Isn't that disgusting? Yeah.
Honest opinion.
Yes.
It's
pretty powerful, because then the kids are like, oh, okay, that's probably the best engagement he's had. Right. They're just like, oh, okay, we get that.
Well, and I can relate. My mom had to go to the hospital, or my dog had surgery, right? And
Yeah.
as a kid, then you're like, again, teachers are so, right? And
Right,
they're
that
not-
falls under that third category of skill. That's regulated. Because this isn't going to cross, and I thought, I went, okay, this isn't going to cross. Like, you don't have to have a disaster.
Yeah.
Crisis like that, personal life. Let's try something different. what do you guys need? Where are my resources at?
That's funny, because that's one of those things that simultaneously will help build a relationship with kids, but it also simultaneously won't work unless you have a relationship with kids.
Yeah.
Because I've been, or seen some situations where they're trying to do that, the kids could care less because they're not connected to them. Let them slide. That's a weird.
Well, and I think that also goes back to right? So the setup, you have that moment.
Okay, one more minute.
You're good to go. And you could have that moment. Things are gonna be clear. But if you don't.
Number one, they have no self.
And you're.
You're a certain maybe in a certain way, and that maybe impacts something
I love.
That's pretty powerful to be done after my first like now. That's fun.
Okay, we're good. I know. We're just gonna teach them this. Done. The next day.
So, yeah.
No, we got to keep the next organization. Right. Okay. I have awareness. Now what do I do? Now what's the plan? What's my strategy? Right, you need the practical.
But a whole bunch of that fiber, that balance, making sure we're regulated and where.
All right, I heard the 1 minute. I heard the 1 minute. There's wrap ups.
Great. All right, so I overheard some good stuff there. So what's the benefit for teaching these SEL skills on academics? What's going to be the benefit to that?
Can you say that one more time? You kind of cut out a little bit.
Sorry about that. So what's the benefit to teaching social emotional learning with regards to academic progress and performance?
We were just talking about how it can keep kids with different problems in the classroom. So working with in the LRC resource, we have a lot of students with pretty high anxiety. They come across something that they don't know or understand. They want to leave. They want to go get help because they don't feel comfortable in that classroom. If they don't know how to advocate for themselves in front of their kind of peers, if they feel embarrassed. Or with some of our program kiddos, if they become dysregulated, and again, they need that cool off. Sometimes it can be on the complete opposite side of the school where their teacher is. So if we teach those things in the classroom, they're going to have a lot more access to the academic instruction.
Absolutely. So if you can manage your emotions and use different coping skills that allow you to stay in the classroom and be present for the instruction, the more you're going to learn. If you can't regulate your emotions or you don't have the coping strategies, and the only way that you know to get yourself back together is to leave the classroom, not that we don't want to use that strategy ever, but if that's the go-to strategy, then those kids aren't available for instruction. So that lack of social and emotional learning decreases academic achievement. So let me go back to the other question here. Let me just pull this up. So what are some of the skills that students need to be able to remain in the classroom or to be able to manage their emotions? What are some of the skills that they need to be able to do that?
Being able to ask for help and problem solve.
Good, excellent. Anything else?
Persisting in a task.
Great. Anything else that you can think of?
I mean, all the ones.
Yeah.
The whole slide that you shared a little bit ago.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good.
Identify feelings.
Very good.
You know, giving and receiving compliments. This is one that always takes me aback, right? Because you think you're just being an awesome teacher with like your specific and targeted praise, right? That you've been taught for so long. And then that's the thing that sets the kid off because they they think if they're getting praise, it's strings attached or something is gonna happen, or it's the, you know, the other shoe's about to drop or something like that. And so it totally does the opposite of what you hoped it would do. And you wouldn't necessarily target that as the trigger.
Right.
That's
And so how are you guys addressing these skills right now? I mean, district now, is there a universal curriculum? Is this something that you teach?
Elementary. At the secondary, I don't know of anything at our school. I do a lot of stuff with habits of mind.
Good.
And the elementary folks were saying second steps.
Okay, great.
And
A lot of people are using zones.
the
Those
zones,
regulations,
yeah.
that's against the law.
The regulation, good. Great. So you've got a variety of strategies that you've already started using. That's excellent. Okay, great. So let's
Behavior game and some other tools as well.
good. All right. So let me try and get back in here to screen share.
Oh, I'm not just using habits of mind. It's not-
Oh, here, go back to your invite.
Are you guys seeing the slides again?
This.
Nope.
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. Let's try that again. I tried something a little different. My entire screen.
The other one just leads to this virtual classroom. Okay. We have it on our own screens.
Okay. How's that look?
It's not on your screen though. Oh, I think you froze. That's what it looks like.
Oh,
It's just catching up. I think we're okay if
okay.
we keep chatting, yeah, because there's just a lag.
Okay. So the slide that I have in front of me, so if it takes a couple minutes to catch up, the slide that I have now are the 10 teaching practices that promote social and emotional learning. So we've got two different types of teaching practices. We have social teaching practices and then instructional teaching practices. And the social teaching practices are when we teach from the student's perspective using data. So rather than thinking that the teacher is the center of the universe in the classroom, we're reading from the perspective that the student is the center of the universe, and that we're using a common language between ourselves and the students, and that we're teaching the students skills that help them manage their emotions and their responses, how they approach a task and accomplish a goal. And we're actively teaching kids how to be empathetic toward one another and how to cooperate with one another. So those are the social teaching practices. And then the instructional teaching practices, you can see again, a lot of this is student-centered. So you don't see anything here about the teacher standing in front of the room doing a lecture. There's cooperative groups. It's student-directed. We're building a student's sense of accomplishment and competence. We're also asking them to reflect on their own performance. Rather than being driven by teacher feedback, we're asking the student to reflect on their own performance, giving some guidelines.
That's interesting.
And what I included here is a teacher self-assessment tool. So what I'd like you to do, and you can do this on your own and then talk amongst yourselves a bit. But there's the link embedded right into the PowerPoint. So if you have an electronic version of the PowerPoint, you should get this tool here. So when you scroll down, there's 3 areas that you're going to look at. Again, just like we looked at the last slide, you're going to look at social interaction strategies and then instructional interactions. So you're going to take a look at, if you take a look at page 4 of this self-assessment tool, it has a variety of practices that it wants you to read and rate yourself on. And the scale that you're going to use to rate yourself is either you don't implement this, this is something that is difficult for you to implement, this is a practice that you do reasonably well, very well, or extremely well. So you're going to score yourself 1 through 5 on each of those practices. And then when you get down through that, there is the next part asks you to agree or disagree with a certain number of statements about your own behavior. And then as you go through that, at the very bottom, I'm just going to show you the score sheet. On page 13, you're going to give yourself a score. Okay. And it's not that there's a judgment necessarily. You're just going to kind of reflect on your scores. Where did you score highest? Where did you score lowest? And then what are you going to do as a result of those scores? All right, so go ahead and score yourself on that, and I'll score myself at the same time, and we can compare.
This would be way better than the PDP thing we have to check off and score ourselves on. This would be so much more helpful.
So just to clarify, are we doing section 1 or section 2?
You can do both. You can do section 1 and section 2, because the first one has to do with social interaction, and the second one has to do with actual instructional practices. You know, I think an easier way to do this is like after you finish part A, let's talk about it a little bit. So let's, instead of doing the whole thing, let's go section by section. So once you're done with part A, we'll talk about it a little bit. So you guys let me know when you're done with that section.
I think we've got a few more to go.
Okay, good.
How are we doing, team? Are we pretty good now? Okay, I think we're good.
All right. So in the first section there about student-centered discipline, I'm going to share my reflection and then I'll let you guys share your reflections. So I haven't been in a classroom with students for quite a while, so essentially you guys, the adults that I work with, are my students, and I had a really tough group at the beginning of the school year where I had a group of teachers who were sitting with their back to me, and I had one teacher who every time I said something she didn't like, she would shake her head, and it really rattled me. So, and I didn't handle it well at all. I ended up not losing my temper, but I didn't carefully measure my words, and I said something that came out in a way that I didn't intend. So I think if I reflect on my my behavior management, classroom management, for lack of a better word, this is something that with working with adults, that I probably would like and have been asking for all year long, a lot more help. To get ahead of something, and to also be considering where the teachers that I'm working with are coming from, rather than just seeing it as a negative behavior that I have to deal with. Now, how did you guys do on this section?
Do you want us to share out, or do you want us to talk amongst ourselves, or?
If a couple of people could share out, that would be great.
Okay. Just about what we thought about it, or?
How do you, when you scored yourself on those statements about student-centered discipline, how did you feel that you were doing? Was this an area that you were strong in, or was this an area that you found that you could use a little more work?
I feel like at the high school level, sometimes I take this for granted quite a bit. Just because they're a lot calmer than when I used to teach elementary school. But I do think in general, especially when we're doing a new activity or a presentation or a class discussion, we do a fairly good job about communicating with the students, like how we like to each other, what we expect. And I feel like we're pretty understanding as far as making sure that consequences are logical and we're not being especially harsh, and letting students discuss how and why we do things.
Great. Do you feel that that's consistent in both general education classrooms and special education classrooms?
I think you have to have these conversations a lot more in the special education setting. Just from what I've seen, I do see that when our students are with their general education peers, a lot of that modeling really helps.
Great.
When they're in the special education setting, I'm still the same teacher I was in gen ed. We have to have some of those conversations a little bit more often. But I feel like my students do a good job reflecting and redirecting because we've built that base.
Good. Anybody else want to share how they felt about these questions, how they scored?
Kind of going off your last question, I think some of my students are able to generalize those skills in the general education setting, but it depends on how much of that common language you're using with teachers. So most of our elementary classrooms are PACS trained, and so I'm able to use that language, but then the students who are in classrooms that are not PACS trained, sometimes there's not that carryover and there's not that consistency and discipline, and so I think that's where a lot of students feel frustrated and feel like they're not able to be successful because expectations may be different or consequences or rewards may be different. So for me, it kind of depends classroom to classroom.
So would this teacher self-reflection tool be something that would be helpful to share with your colleagues to get them all on the same page of understanding with regard to these different practices for social and emotional learning, what it is that they should be doing?
Yeah.
Great. So instead of but taking a lot of our time on this whole questionnaire, I just wanted to give you a feel for it so you could see not only how you might score, but how you could also share that with your colleagues. So this would be a tool that maybe at a staff meeting or something, everybody could take a look at, that they understand that there are these different areas of discipline, teacher language, responsibility and choice, that if they're thinking about these things in their teaching and actively trying to implement them or improve in areas where they're not strong, they're going to be helping their students' social and emotional learning. So this, again, this whole self-assessment chart is the link is built right into your PowerPoint. And so I hope that you will take the time to complete the whole thing when you have a chance, and then also share it with your colleagues. because I think it might take a little bit longer than I had planned for us to do the whole thing. All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. All right. And so now most states have some kind of social and emotional learning standards. So I did a little search of the different states across the country to see what standards there were. And you can see on one side of this, there's a link for the Oregon standards, and those standards cover grades pre-K to K. And on the left-hand side of your screen, you see the link for the Connecticut standards K to 3. So I wanted you guys to have a chance to take a look at those two documents. So you can click on the link for both of those and just take a look. The Connecticut document, of course, covers a few more grades. You need to have a chance to take a look at those documents. So I have the Connecticut document open up, but I'm not sure that you might be seeing, are you seeing just that screen or multiple screens?
Multiple, but it might not have caught up. We all have it on our own screen too, so.
Okay. So if you open up the Connecticut document first, you can see that I just opened up, for example, the grade 1 standards. And in each of those areas that we talked about, so for example, the first one for grade 1, helping students to build self-awareness, and it talks about following agreed upon rules for discussion, building others' talk, describing people, places, and things. And then it also gets into some academic standards that show them as competent and capable. So if you start scrolling down, developing a sense of themselves as a learner, being curious, and developing initiative, being cooperative during learning experiences, identifying and understanding emotions, being empathetic, having an awareness of social skills and interpersonal skills, and making decisions. And then also it has a section as you continue to scroll down on skills to help students build working memory, to help them be flexible, cognitively flexible. It starts working on those executive skills, be able to self-regulate, managing attention and behavior. So I think for those of you who work with older students, when you take a look at some of those executive function skills, there may be some things that even for your older students, they still need to work on. And it makes the connection to some of the grade level standards in academics. So I thought it would be helpful to be able to see what's happening in your state and then what's happening in other states as well. So this was the Connecticut document. So scroll through that and then also take a look at the document in your state for pre-K to K. Get that to open up. Did I do lose it? Oops. All right, I'm going to try and get my my Google Drive to open back up again. I lost my PowerPoint. There. There we go. Have you seen the Oregon document before?
Oregon.
No.
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 Okay, so that's good. So you can take a look at it now. And granted, again, it's just from pre-K to K. Like with everything else that we're doing in schools, if we're using an SRBI or MTSS framework, everything that we're doing is to give that emphasis to kids K to 3 because they're at such an important developmental place with their brain. And so the more effort we put into providing experiences that allow that brain development to take off and maximize itself, then we're preventing problems further down the road. So that's why all of these initiatives have focused so heavily on pre-K to 3. And your document from Oregon is actually really nice. It has a really nice description of why you're doing what you're doing and being developmentally appropriate, culturally responsive, and thinking about trauma that kids may have experienced. And then it has your guidelines, making sure that kids are ready to be successful and develop self-regulation, executive function, be curious. So you've got your nice developmental progressions from age 3 to the end of kindergarten. And I think this is a really nice document. And again, one of the things that's most powerful about the social emotional learning is if we teach kids to self-regulate, research is finding that a student's ability to regulate their own emotions is a greater predictor of academic success, even beyond readiness to read. So that ability to manage your emotions in response to situations is the greatest predictor of academic success. So the fact that your state has a document that specifically addresses this from pre-K to K is really important because that will allow kids who are getting that direct instruction to be that much more successful in school. Right. So those are the links to your documents and our Connecticut document. So there's a variety of evidence-based programs that take those kinds of standards and put them together into instructional programs. And again, you've got the social skills. So when looking for a program, looking for programs that provide that social emotional skills instruction. And that top red box shows you the skills that we're going to be looking for. And then we want to create an environment, learning environment that is described in the second red box. And as a result, if we have these two elements in place, you're going to see kids that are more successful because school is the place that they want to be, and they're attached to people in the school system. They're committed to finishing school, and we're going to see less risk-taking behavior, especially as kids get older, because that's what gets our teenagers in trouble. And as a result, we've got kids who are successful in school, work, and life. So there's, again, a lot of research to back this up for why we should be doing this. And you can see there's a variety of studies that have been done, that have been replicated to support this type of instruction. So if we're providing this type of instruction, research has found that kids who get good social emotional programming score 9 percentile points higher in social behavior, 9% lower in conduct problems, 10 percentile points lower in emotional distress, sorry about that, and then 11 percentile points higher in academic achievement than kids who did not get the same type of program. And again, by providing this instruction, we're saving money because we're preventing problems. So we're actually doing a good thing in our budgets too, because if we're using these different programs, so you could see some of the things that were, you guys mentioned before. I think you mentioned a couple of these at least. I remember hearing Second Step, and I think one other. Do you see another one there?
We have some of our schools are doing responsive classroom.
Good.
Is somebody doing the 4 R's? I feel like reason, relay.
So we're preventing problems by providing this instruction, and that ultimately saves money for our school systems. And then this is the positive effect, and so those effect sizes on the right-hand side, anything over 0.25 is desirable. So you can see that when it comes to social emotional skills and academic performance, social emotional programming has a large effect size. And it's not that those other effect sizes aren't great, but what we're looking for is effect sizes of 0.25 or higher. So everything is pretty close there. It definitely has a positive effect on academic performance and kids' overall social emotional skills. And this is a document that has a summary of all the research. So if you wanted to look at more research or share that with your colleagues, you could find this document online, and you could share that too. So that there's lots of research that shows kids have better attitudes, their behaviors are better, and their academic performance is better. So, there's a couple different approaches. We want to have explicit skills instruction that can either be direct or in a constructivist way with kid participation in developing this. It should be integrated into the classroom.
Which slide are you on right now? We're still seeing you.
17.
Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you, I was lost.
Let's try this again. How about now?
No,
Nope, we can still see you.
What's the title of the slide?
The SEL approaches.
Okay.
Page 17.
Yeah, SEL approaches.
Got it. Yep, now we see it.
All right. Yay. Okay, so again, we want to direct our students. We want to make sure that teachers are thinking about their own behaviors too. But it's not just about the student, it's about the teachers being able to share this information as well, and that we can extend this beyond the classroom. So in order to have a good curriculum, we want to have a good instructional sequence. Just with any other comprehensive curriculum, you want to have a good scope and sequence that allows students to be active and involved in the instruction, and that we're directly teaching everything. We're not allowing kids to infer. We're making all of the information explicit. And again, we're having both the adults and the students model these skills and discuss them when they come up in relevant situations. We want to make sure we're building a community in our classroom and that we're giving kids opportunities to contribute not only in the classroom, but in the school as a whole and their community at large. Here are some core principles of community building. I'll let you take a look at those. So you really do have to think of the school as a community and really think about how do I promote that collaboration and contribution from everybody to push that community forward that is working towards the same values, the same goals, and the same expectations. So I included this. I'm not sure if this is something that you guys are using. A lot of schools in Connecticut are using positive behavioral supports, PBIS. And so when we talk about that, we want to make the distinction between PBIS and social emotional learning. And we also have a lot of school systems that use restorative practices. So here's the difference. So PBIS is modeled to help make sure that they respond to student behavior in appropriate ways. Social emotional learning is about giving students the tools so that when they're in a situation, they know how to respond. And then restorative practices help everybody build and maintain that community. Something doesn't go the way it's supposed to go. You guys use all three of those in your school district?
We used to have PBIS, we don't use it anymore. And I don't know if any
Okay.
people implementing of restorative practices, but I'm familiar with them.
Okay.
I think that PBIS and restorative practices are used more at the elementary level on a pretty regular basis. I don't think we call it PBIS anymore, but tier one.
Okay.
Tier one interventions or tier one supports or something.
And how about restorative practices at the elementary level?
Yes.
It depends on the school. I think it depends on the school. Not
Okay.
consistent.
You use it at the high school.
You guys use it, yeah. Some high schools, yeah. Middle school, what
So-
about
It's not that's communicated, right?
you guys? I was gonna say is middle school. That's using.
I think it's counselor to counselor, teacher to teacher, case manager to case manager on how and what that looks like and how it's documented too.
Okay. Okay. So pretty inconsistent, it sounds like, Lisa.
So is there thinking across the district, given that you have some of these practices in some places and not in others, is there initiative in the district to sort of unify this and bring it together?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a want to do that. It's just how to do that and keep autonomy in the building for the students that they serve.
Okay. All right, that's good to know.
I think that's the struggle we're in right now.
Right. All right. So again, based on what we were just talking about, in each of your buildings, you do want to have a slightly, tailored system based on your building and based on the age of the kids, but you do want to have tiered interventions. So to start at the very base of that, you want to make sure that there is some kind of school-wide community. So even though there are different practices, in order for this all to work, there does need to be some consensus about what that school-wide community is going to be like. And that requires that there is some kind of social emotional learning curriculum, that there is a school climate initiative so that it's a very positive environment that is proactive when it comes to discipline, that instruction is individualized, and that the school values all the different cultures. So that's definitely a foundation where you need to get started. And then you want to make sure that you have interventions to address factors that your students demonstrate that put them at risk for either academic or behavioral difficulties. And then you want to have individualized supports for students at risk while you're, to support those kids while you're building your community. So this has to be there immediately while you're also working on this. But it's these pieces of the puzzle that will give you that three-tiered social emotional learning environment. And this is just, I'm sorry, it's kind of funky.
Lisa, you're kind of cutting
This
in and out. Can I answer a question though that was asked over here? So we're talking about
Sure.
where are we at in our district, and I know we have rolled out tier 1 supports and we have documents for that, but the hope is to do more around tier 2 than next year. And then of course, we are gonna fall more into that top tier level.
So that's a good response with this slide here. So at 1, do you have school-wide behavioral expectations?
I'm sorry, Lisa, you're still cutting out a little bit there.
Sorry. So
That's okay.
at tier 1, do you have school-wide behavior expectations?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. And you have a system for acknowledging positive behaviors?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. And you're using data to respond to all of that?
Yes.
Super. Have you selected a curriculum? So you said some schools are using second step. Is that going to be consistent that schools are going to select their own curriculum?
I think all schools have access to second steps. It may be based on counselor implementation in elementary, and then we all have access to the zones again, but I think that is also could be leadership driven as far as the implementation on that. Am I characterizing that? Oh, and then PACS is one of our tools as well that we do. And that really is implemented, I would say, district-wide for kinder and first. And then I think people are starting to scale it up to 6th grade. I don't think everybody there.
Yeah, we don't have any of that.
Okay.
But not high school and middle school level, none of that is necessarily happening consistently.
Oh, it's definitely foggy in middle school and.
Yeah, we have some alignment to do in the tiers for secondary.
Yes. That's our secondary administrator talking over there.
All right. So this is kind of a nice graphic then to help you see where you're at. So what you should be doing at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 is kind of laid out for you here, even though the boxes, I apologize, sort of overlap onto some of the print, but you can see what the components are of each one of those tiers. And so, again, you can start, it's important that, and probably as special ed teachers, you have tier 3, you have a lot of these tier 3 things already in place. So that's good. And then now you can go back and start working on tier 1. And, again, a lot of the emphasis is at the the elementary levels, but at the secondary level, we can really be working on kids being able to see things from someone else's perspective, because that's a skill that secondary age kids really still continue to struggle with, and is important for them to be successful. Especially if they can do that, it allows them to do some of these restorative practices in tier 3. So again, go ahead.
Oh, we're just a long way away from these.
That's okay.
At the secondary,
It's
we're a long way.
Our school is doing a lot of this stuff and with a lot of success, but also there continues, it feels like we're in that changing, we're in the big change, we're all like, it's crazy, but we use a lot of these tier 3 intensive strategies, and for a good couple of years now.
The top tier.
Yeah, the tier 3, and definitely tier 2. We don't have the curriculum. I mean, that happens in mine, but that's old, and that's just been much in the SLC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Right, and so what happens a lot of the time.
Support still needs to
Yeah, we
happen.
don't have a lot of that, and there's a lot of people on board, but there's a lot of teachers that aren't on board with the, I guess you would say, the restorative practices as far as consequences for behaviors, and their take is that they're feeling that there aren't any consequences for some would be serious behaviors and some not so serious. And, teachers are getting frustrated because they're being sent back in the classroom with no consequences. So it's kind of it's like they're trying to push this forward, and I think it's working in a lot of areas, but yet there's pushback too.
Well, I think if tier 1
Growing pains.
is fleshed out and ran with fidelity, right? Then the need for the level or the amount or the intensity of tier 2 and tier 3 intervention, what I'm finding is the struggle is that because we don't have a solid base in tier 1, our triangle's almost flipped, right?
Yeah.
So we have a
Cars.
huge amount of intense work that we're doing, and very rarely are we really addressing the problem where it's really a school-wide and in the classroom implementation about what types of supports and how are we delivering that instruction, so that we don't have to be so focused on the influences, or even the
Right.
strategic subject matter.
So what's happening? So what's happening at the secondary level is you are in a reaction mode. So you are providing a lot of the mental health and PBIS, but a lot of it is a reaction to problems that you're having.
Yeah.
So at the secondary level, to get started, I would, before you worry about a curriculum, I would definitely get a school climate assessment going, and also share some of the research about the benefits of this. And then once you do that, then you can start talking about what are the school-wide behavior expectations and what system are you going to use to acknowledge those? Because you're right, your triangle problem is flipped. And again, because you're in a reaction mode here, instead of you some of the proactive teaching of skill instruction and some of these restorative practices, because that will help balance everything out. But you're right now, because this tier 1 isn't well established, you're in a reactive mode, and so you're over relying on a lot of these other mental health and positive behavioral supports. But it sounds like you guys have a really good insight into what's happening in your district, so that's great. So hopefully some of this, these visuals will help you make that continuous forward movement, which sounds like you're all really working on.
What does a school climate assessment look like, and who creates that and implements that?
So we've got a district culture and climate team, and I'm a part of it, and we just completed for the year our individual school assessments. And so your culture and climate team at Glencoe completed that assessment, and whoever's the head of that has that data. And it looks at, do you have positive behavior supports in place? Do you have consistent responses to behavior? What are, I guess, 42 questions.
Do you also do a student?
Who does a student one? Some schools do.
At this,
Fifth and sixth graders.
Fifth and sixth.
at this point, that data was just done by the culture and climate team, which is mostly, I think it's like the dean option on that team.
Because I recommend that in addition to doing that, that you have a survey that the kids can do and a survey that the parents can do. All right, so this is what a coordinated district-wide model would look like. So you can see that it starts with that instruction and a good school climate, and then you support that by having a strong school family community partnership with coordinated mental health and health services, and after school and community activities. And again, here's a free publication that you can get on evidence-based social emotional learning programs. So another great resource for your schools as you're thinking about what you want your curriculums to look like if you don't already have one. And then in the absence of, definitely having a curriculum or direct skills instruction across the district, this is a really great resource. Have any of you seen this before? I heard some people say yes. Has everyone seen it?
No.
Okay, all right. So let me show this to you because this is a really great resource. This is a website. It's maintained by a school psychologist and it's free. So the one downside to it is sometimes you'll click on a link to get a resource and you'll come to a dead end, but there's still tons and tons of stuff there. So let me show that to you. Can you see this website or are you seeing me?
Website, but it's small. We all have it.
Okay, let me try. Okay, so when you look the home screen there, how it's set up is it's set up to, it describes a variety of different behaviors that students might display in a classroom. So say, for example, if we're thinking about social emotional learning, we could say a student has poor peer relationships. Okay, so if I click on that, poor peer relationships, what it comes to is it describes the student. So it says the student has frequent conflicts with peers, tells on others, has difficulty carrying on a conversation, is immature or inappropriate, annoys or irritates others, difficulty relating, trouble sharing, taking turns. Those behaviors. And if that describes your student, you say yes, you just click on yes. Does this describe the student? So you click on yes.
This is great.
Yeah.
Great.
And now it's got all these,
Teachers.
yeah, it's got all these interventions in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And it will tell you how and when to do these interventions. And you can also get data. So I'm going to let you guys play around with that for a few minutes. So check that out and then be able to share out some good things that you found. So we'll look at this for at least 5 minutes and then we'll share out.
I could see this being shared at like our academic seminars to gen ed teachers. And saying, here's a whole, this is awesome, this is just great accommodations, you know, how to.
Yeah, just some things to try that you can do anytime. Yeah.
There's a couple that don't make sense or kind of against the trauma informed, but the timeouts.
Oh, yeah.
There's a couple in there that you're like,
No.
did you ever pass it?
Yeah.
Well, the universal.
So I think
Working on that. So we can weed out some of those.
want a little more time, or do you have enough?
I think we're good.
All right. So tell me you look at this website and how would you use it?
Well, I think we had some concerns just about some of the pieces in it wouldn't be in keeping with our trauma-informed care, but I think we could take certain tools from it and kind of do a cut and paste. So I don't know if this would be a site we would recommend. I'm trying to summarize the group from what I kind of overheard. So I think that we might cut and paste some of the possible strategies, but we wouldn't necessarily refer people to this site just because it isn't in keeping with that trauma-informed lens in all cases.
So what did you find that was in conflict with that?
I think one of them was timeout that we saw. What were some of the other ones, you guys?
Take away privileges.
Taking away privileges.
Yep, keeping them in at recess.
Yeah. There's just some kind of old,
Okay.
some old school stuff in there that we might not use.
And the teachers we struggle with the most are the ones who are entrenched in those old school practices that we're trying to move forward.
Yeah, it just wouldn't align with like restorative practice and stuff like that, that we would be more inclined to use.
So this wouldn't be something that you share with your general ed staff. This would be something that you might pick and choose some strategies for to share with them when they come to you with an issue.
Yeah, I think the thing that was cool that people liked about it was just the format, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of idea. And we've been working, we have a universal supports team that's kind of started to build that kind of website. So I think this would be neat to see the format.
You know,
Oh, that's great.
another way though would be to go through that and then the caveats with it. So, I mean, it may be that those are the only 2 or 3
Yeah,
that we have issue with, and then, then it comes with a warning that these 2 or 3 things are not in alignment, and then it opens up the whole thing. Maybe, but I think we would have to examine it first thoroughly.
Could also give, open up the conversation again, yet again, for some of those teachers, right? About why we aren't doing those things in a less confrontational form at when, it can be a little emotional sometimes in the moment, so.
Yeah, we may not have to throw the whole thing out, just. Yeah.
I think you could use it for like SST, stuff like that, though. Coming up with options for teachers to be trying if you let them that way.
I do think, I absolutely hear what you're saying, and I think that's important because you don't want to be sharing out information with teachers that's going to be is not going to be in alignment with what you're trying to get them to do, especially with regard to trauma-informed teaching practices. But I agree with you. One of the things that I really do like about the way this website is formatted is that when you select a specific skill, so like I have conflict resolution here, it says, why should I do this? When should I do this? How do I do this? And then it gives you some nice direction about how to go forward. And then having those resources. One of the things that teachers usually find frustrating about this website is that when you click on some of these these links, these resources, you might end up with a dead end. So that's one thing to keep in mind too, that it's a free resource, but there are some limits to it. So I think that you guys did a really nice reflective review of how you might use this. For you guys as special ed teachers, I think this is a great resource because if you continue to dig, and I can't remember exactly where they are, but like there's pre-made social stories in here. There's lots of data tracking forms. So even though there are some limitations to it, there's also a lot of benefits. So even if you don't end up sharing this with your colleagues, I hope that you'll bookmark this site and come back to it to find some resources to use for yourself or possibly to share.
Where is that trauma-informed care? I don't even see it. What do you mean? Is there, it's not on there?
I don't think it's in
It's
here.
not that website isn't aligned with trauma informed care. That is what it was.
Oh,
Yeah, I do think that, I know for sure that that website wasn't created when trauma-informed teaching practices were, it was long before that was a term that we were really talking about at great length. So again, like I said, it's one guy that maintains that website. So you have to take everything that you find there with a grain of salt. But there are lots of great resources there. So now let's talk a little bit about social emotional learning for kids with disabilities. So they definitely benefit from this type of instruction, just like it's good for all kids. But when these evidence-based curriculum were designed, they were not created or tested with kids with disabilities in mind. So just like we're doing with anything else, teachers need to build in accommodations, modifications, and or specially designed instruction in order for them to be successful. So one of the things that I think is important, because we have the kids that we work with that really need social emotional learning skills have other issues that interfere with their ability to manage their behavior and regulate their emotions. So there are some things that we can do to help them. Again, we were talking about kids with anxiety or kids who can't regulate and them having to leave the room. And we don't want to have that. That's like a last resort. So some kids, if we can allow them to move, to allow them to calm themselves so that they can remain engaged in the classroom, that's an option. And then allowing kids to use different kinds of fidgets rather than, because kids need that opportunity to touch things to help them stay self-regulated. So instead of poking kid next to them or grabbing something that doesn't belong to them, if we can allow them to have different fidgets, that's going to be helpful. And then we have kids who are overstimulated by different sights and sounds in the classroom. We want to think about those and what can we do to help manage the learning environment that they're in so that they're not experiencing that sensory over-responsiveness. Does that sound like any kids that you're working with? And can you think of some things that you could do in the classroom to help them with these 3 areas?
Yeah, yes, everybody's nodding their head or saying yes.
So at elementary school, we feel like we have these in place.
Yeah.
Excellent, good. How about at the secondary level?
Some elementary schools, we feel like we really have this.
These
Okay.
The 4 speeder leaders that might have been chosen to be on this team because they have everything in place. So they need the rest of the
Not
district.
everything, a good chunk of it.
Feel like they have everything in place. But they're ready, they're gonna help teach the rest of the crew, so that'll be great.
Yeah, because, you know, I think that's great. And I do find that as a general rule that elementary schools are much better about these things. You know, that if I go into a classroom, I'm more likely to see various kinds of seating, various instructional groupings, different kinds of fidgets either built in at the chair, under the desk. I am more likely to see that at the elementary level. But I think people forget at the secondary level that kids need that opportunity to move and to have different sensory experiences just as much as little kids do. Because even if we think about ourselves as adults, you know, think of when you were, even if you're just sitting in this session with me now, you are doing different things to keep yourself activating, you know, shifting your seat, maybe somebody is, standing up for a little while. You have adjusted your devices for the right amount of contrast on the screen. So all of these things that we think about pretty readily with elementary age kids, we need to make sure that we do the same thing for our secondary age kids. And one of the easiest things to do is to give the kids opportunities to move. We ask secondary age kids to sit an awful lot. And there's a lot of research too, just on engagement, never mind calming, that kids really should get a chance to get up and move, even if it's just to stand up for a second, every 15 to 20 minutes. So I think that that's something that we need to pay more attention to secondary level. And it has a big impact on student success with this kind of social emotional learning. And then if we think about kids who have learning disabilities or attention issues, I don't think there's anything on here that isn't surprising to you. But again, we are going to have to think about how do we break down and scaffold this instruction for kids who have learning disabilities or attention issues. And then I know that one of our later sessions is going to be about universal design for learning. But that's, again, this is one of those critical pieces of information that we really need to get up to speed on as educators. Universal design for learning has been named by the Common Core and now the new science standards as a tool that's really essential for kids to be successful with those standards. So I think I built this in as a link. Let me just double check here. Yes, I did. So I built a little link here from Understood about a quick overview of universal design learning. I know that we're going to get into this in more depth, but if you wanted a chance to take a look at this before we do that session on universal design, this is a nice little overview of how you can use UDL to help kids who are having difficulties with attention or have a learning disability. Oops.
Like a sneak.
And again, yeah, a sneak peek. And again, we tend to think about, a lot of times we as teachers tend to think about the things that kids can't do. And with kids who have learning disabilities, one of the things that we need to make sure we do is always be thinking about the things that students can do well and give them an opportunity to expand on those things. So again, we're going to teach social skills just like we would do anything else, break it down into small steps, give lots of examples, give many opportunities for practice and feedback, because, you know, just like we do with our academic skills, typical kids, you need about 20 repetitions of a new skill. Excuse me. And kids with disabilities can sometimes need up to 40. And then not only do we want to teach them that new skill, but we want to give them an opportunity to generalize it and use it into a variety of settings. And then the other thing that I think is important is reinforcing that idea of cooperative learning, that this isn't a competition, that building this community is for the benefit of all, not to for one, you know, nobody's going to win at this. This is something that we're all going to benefit from. And so what I did do here is I put in a graphic of universal design for learning. Again, this is a little sneak peek of our next session, but I think this is really important. So this is what the guidelines look like, and in a second I'll take you to the CAST website. But the way that Universal Design for Learning is organized is it's organized into these three overarching principles. So you have multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And everything that comes from these guidelines is based on brain research. So it's all evidence-based, and it all connects to how does the brain actually learn. So this first principle here, multiple means of engagement, has to do with the inside of your brain. So if you're someone who's been doing a lot of work on trauma, you know that that inside part of the brain is where kids are affected. And if you can't appeal to this part of the brain, that the learning doesn't move up into the higher parts of the brain in these other two principles. So what we want to do is, you probably can't see it here. Let me switch to other representation of this. But you'll see here that under recruiting interest, one of the big things is minimizing threats and distractions. That has a huge connection to social emotional learning. So I'm going to just take you to the CAST website. Okay. So can you see this here? You're seeing the CAST website?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So what you see now is a better representation of that same graphic that I had on the slide. So this first principle here that talks about recruiting interest, when we talked about good social emotional learning curriculum, you remember we talked about choice and autonomy, making this be something that's relevant and valuable and authentic. Minimizing threats and distractions helps the student build community. And then if we skip down, actually, if you look at any one of these under the green, you can see the connection to social emotional learning. So all of the checkpoints under multiple means of engagement are directly related to social emotional learning. So the way that you use this is if there is a barrier. So say you have a classroom where kids who have experienced trauma don't feel safe, you can click on this checkpoint that says minimizing threats and distractions, and it will give you more information. It will talk about all the things that you can do to make the classroom space feel safe. And that can be by having charts, calendars, schedules, visible timers that increase predictability, having class routines, letting the students know when changes are coming. Varying the level of sensory stimulation. So we just talked about that with our kids who need that different sensory level, where we vary the background noise or visual stimulation, have noise buffers available, vary social demands. So it gives you all of this information about how you can do that to make the space more a safe place for all kids to learn. So that's one of the ways that you can use Universal Design for Learning, is by looking at these different checkpoints and using them to minimize a barrier that you see happening in the classroom or in the curriculum. So we talked about maybe kids aren't doing a good job of assessing themselves or reflecting on their own behavior. How do I promote that? I go back into these UDL guidelines, click on them, and now it's going to describe it, and it's also going to give me strategies that are going to allow me to do that. And again, we'll talk about this more, but I just wanted to plant this seed in your head and give you this resource, because this is really, this has been out there for 30 years. It really works. It's not hard for teachers to take hold of, and it has huge benefits in promoting any initiative that we're trying to make work. So it's not another new thing that teachers need to learn. Universal design integrates perfectly with any of those initiatives because it's all connected to making kids who are expert learners. At the bottom, you'll see they're purposeful, motivated, knowledgeable, strategic, and goal-directed. That's what we want for our kids. And on this next slide here, what I did was I kind of created a simplified UDL guideline. So it takes each one of those checkpoints and puts them into a little simpler language. So that's there for you as a resource as well. So if we have kids in our classroom who are having a hard time persisting, what do? We set a vision for the goal, we create a community, and we talk about learning as effort and process. We want kids to be more self-regulated. We set personal goals to make kids feel confident in owning their learning. We give them healthy interactions. We teach them how to manage healthy interactions. And then we increase their understanding of progress towards goals. So in the absence of a real SEL curriculum, this is a great tool to help us build kids' learning in social emotional skills. And so, do you have any questions about that before I move on to some of these strategies?
I think we're good.
All right, good. Okay. So what I include here at the end of the PowerPoint is a bunch of different social emotional learning activities that you can try. So I have this poison thought game, which everybody does that. What are your poison thoughts? And then filtering thoughts, helping kids know what's okay and not okay to say when you're angry. Getting rid of old, terrible thoughts that kind of eat away at you, and how to come up with new thoughts. So you can see a lot of these things are in a game format, but help the kids develop good coping skills. Coming up with words to help them validate what they're hearing, even if they're not necessarily interested in the conversation that they're having, or they're interested and they don't know how to keep the conversation going. And then listening activities using those validating words. And then compliment tag. Now, remember you guys saying that giving a student a compliment would trigger some of your kids, but this is something where not necessarily you have to say performance-wise, but just something nice about them. And then here's a list of evidence-based programs. Some of these were things that you guys were already using and know about, but then there might be some new ones, and you also looked at that resource where you could get that document that talks about all the evidence-based programs and the research behind them.
Did they put the ruler? I heard it while we were
Yeah, I actually have not heard of that one either, but the others sound familiar.
Yeah, I think we use some form of all the other ones in our schools, but I just hadn't heard of the ruler approach.
All right, so let's take a look at our goals. So what we set out at this beginning of our session was to be able to describe the importance of social emotional learning and how it can be integrated into daily instructional practices. And do you feel like you could do that?
Yes.
Anybody want to take a stab at it? So why is social emotional learning important?
It helps our students be more successful in school and later on as they enter their post-secondary goals.
Excellent. And how should we integrate that into what we're doing every day?
A lot of the standards are pretty well aligned to academic standards and just kind of focusing more on the process of some things. Like how we communicate and giving explicit instruction in that.
Structures, culture, climate,
Norms.
yeah.
Good. And remember, we're going to be talking about not only social skills, but we're going to be using different strategies, instructional strategies. So when we are using this every day, that 2-box component. We've got that social skills instruction that teaches self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And then we're also going to use these instructional practices: cooperative learning, classroom discussion, self-assessment and reflection, student-directed learning, academic priorities and expectations, and building competence. So that's how we're going to build it in every day. What strategies did you learn today to help you guys reflect on your own practices?
The teacher self-assessment tool.
Yep. Good. What opportunities do you have to have teachers give that a try?
You guys think that PLCs would that be an opportunity?
Well, it'd be nice if we could do PD on that, like during academic seminar, but getting a slot in that schedule, which is determined like a year in advance, is really hard.
Start talking to your administrator now, Lynette.
Yeah, I think that's an important.
But it has to come from the top down, not just the bottom up.
The meetings, how about the meetings we do when we go as teams?
Oh, yeah, the leadership team or the secondary leadership. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Or a tool for principals to use as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is somebody speaking to them at the top and saying, you know, you guys need this too?
Yeah, definitely a huge discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I could assign some homework from today, that would be a piece of homework, is to come up with a plan of how you could get that self-assessment out to the teachers, to get them to be thinking about the things that they do well and the things that they need to work on. The other piece of homework that I would give you to think about how you're going to collect information on school climate from your students at the secondary level and your parents.
What was, say the second one again? The first one was to get the self-assessment out. What's the second one?
To, as part of your school climate survey, to get input from the parents and the students.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And did you feel like came up with at least a couple of strategies to help students with disabilities to develop SEL skills?
Yeah, well, resources for sure.
And what's one of the things, one of the strategies that we're going to talk about in a future session? Starts with a U.
Universal design.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right. Okay, so that's what I had for us today. Do you guys have any questions?
Anybody, any questions? Any thoughts? I think we're all at the 6 o'clock point,
Yeah.
Lisa. And though we brought snacks, I can see the blood sugar / brain starting to need some of that mindfulness and resting. It might be time for one of those breaks we just talked about.
Yeah, I think so. I think the timing is perfect. So the next time that I'm going to see you guys, we're going to be talking about defining and creating specially designed instruction, correct?
Yes, we cannot wait for that topic. It's a hot topic, Lisa. I'm just telling
All right, okay.
STI defining it. We're gonna make Sabrina lead it though. We're gonna put her name on it.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Well, that's definitely right up my alley. So
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of your night.
You too.
So the next one is on the 14th?
Yes.
You're doing the 14th and the 20th?